on lesson 9 of Engage New York, and we are still looking at finding the simplest form of a fraction, maybe that big. But this time, so yesterday we just had one unit, like we just had one piece left over. So let me show you. So yesterday we had maybe a couple of parts, but we consolidated that into a unit fraction, into a 1. So we divided by whatever our numerator was, okay? So we divided by our numerator to get that shaded section into 1 unit. Now, in this one, we're not always going to be able to do that, okay? So let's look at this one right here. All right, in this one we have 4 pieces shaded out of 6. So we have 4/6 as our fraction. If I divide 4 by 4, that would get me to a unit fraction of 1, but I cannot divide 6 by 4. That doesn't work. Okay, so basically what I need to think about is like, okay, what could I divide 4 by? What are the factors of 4? Well, I could divide it by 1, I could divide it by 2, and I could divide it by 4. Then I need to think about for 6, what are my factors of 6? What could I divide 6 by? Well, I could divide 6 by 1, I could divide 6 by 2, and I could divide 6 by 3, and I could divide 6 by 6. So then I look for the one that is the biggest that they both have in common, okay? So the greatest common factor is what this is called. We're finding the greatest common factor here. And so my greatest common factor here is a 2, okay? 2 is the biggest number that I can use to divide by both 4 and 6, okay? So if I look at this and I think about what we did yesterday, okay, and I think about, okay, I'm going to erase that line out of the middle. We're going to pretend like that's not there. We're going to tape that up, and we're going to think about it as these horizontal lines. I've got 1, 2, 3. So I'm making groups of 2, which is why right here I'm dividing by 2, because I'm making groups of 2. And the only difference here is that the smallest, simplest fraction I can get for 4/6 is 2/3, because the most I can divide 4/6 is down to 2/3. Okay, let's look at this next one. Okay, so this has 9 pieces, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 pieces out of a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 9 pieces out of 12. Okay, so if I think about this fraction and I think about my 9s, okay, well, I could divide by 1, I could divide by 3, and I could divide by 9. Those are the only ways that I can divide by 9. Those are my factors, okay, and if I think about my factors of 12, I could divide by 1, I could divide by 2, I could divide by 3, I could divide by 4, I could divide by 6, and I could divide by 12. Okay, so we're looking for the biggest one they have in common. So 1's in common, but that's not the biggest. 3 is in common. Is that the biggest? Yes, because this 12 I can't divide by 9, so 9's not going to work, so I'm going to need to divide by 3. Okay, now that's how we look at it if we're looking at the greatest common factor, but the way we're going to look at it here, like, could I take all 9 of these and put them in one group and have 9 more? No. I can't do that. I wouldn't have 9 more. Okay. Could I take all 9 of these and divide it up into half? No, because that would encase all of them. Okay, and then this one would have 6 and that one would have 2. So if I look at this, you can kind of see that that would be a group, and that would be a group, and that would be a group, and that would be a group. So if you think about this fraction and we think about erasing those middle lines, taping them back up to make it a bigger piece, okay, I would make this into 4ths, okay? And so if I look up here, we're dividing it into 3 pieces each. 3 is my biggest common factor. So we are dividing by 3, dividing by 3. What I divide the top by, I also have to divide the bottom by, and so 9 divided by 3 is 3, and 12 divided by 3 is 4. So my simplest form of this fraction is going to be 3/4. And I can look at the picture and see that I would chunk these together. So that's one strategy. But the other strategy is to think, what's the biggest number I can divide 9 by that I can also divide 12 by? What is the biggest common factor? And that biggest common factor for 9 and 12 is 3. And that's going to get it to my simplest form if I look for my largest common factor. Okay, so for this one, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So my denominator is a 10. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. My numerator is a 6. Okay, so let's think about these two numbers. So for 6, I have factors of 1. I can divide it by 2. I can divide it by 3. And I can divide it by 6. For 10, I can divide it by 1, I can divide it by 2, I can divide it by 5, and I can divide it by 10. So those are my factors for 6 and 10. And the biggest factor that they have in common is 2. So I can divide 6 by 2, yes. I can divide 10 by 2, yes. Okay. So we're going to do divide by 2, divide by 2. Do the same for the top as you do for the bottom, and that's going to give me the fraction 3/5. Now, if I just look at the picture model, and I think about this picture model, and I think we're going to tape up this line that goes across the middle and put these parts back together, I can't circle up that whole 3 because then I don't have 3 more over here. And I can't just circle up part of the 3 unless it's equal parts. So like I can do this, I can do 2's, 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 and 2's. Okay, and so then this would be 1/5, this would be 2/5, this would be 3/5, this would be 4/5, and that would be 5/5, and 3 of the 5/5 are shaded together, and this is our simplest form of that fraction. Okay, let's look at this one. So for this one, I've got eighths, and I've got 6 of them. I've got 6/8. Okay. So if I think about this, for 6, I can divide by 1, I can divide by 2, I can divide by 3, and I can divide by 6. Okay, so those are my factors. If I think about this as the rainbow, that's what it would look like. Okay, and if I think about 8, I can divide by 1, I can divide by 2, I can divide by 4, and I can divide by 8. I cannot divide by 3 for 8, so 3 is not going to work for 8. I cannot divide by 6 for 8, so 6 isn't going to work for 8. So the greatest common factor that they have in common is 2. So I'm going to do 6 divided by 2, and I'm going to do 8 divided by 2. If I divide by the top and the bottom, then by the same number, then I know I'm going to get an equivalent fraction. 6 divided by 2 is 3. 8 divided by 2 is 4. And if I think about this picture, I'm grouping up 2's because that's my biggest common factor. And if I group up 2's, you can see I've got 3 out of 4 of the 2's. And this is like taping that line across to make it, or erasing it. You can think about erasing that line across. Okay, so I'm going to save these two. We'll do those two during class. And then we're going to come down here and we're going to do these two where we draw. Okay, so if I had 4/10 is equivalent to 2/5. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a rectangle, and I'm going to look actually at my simplest fraction, and I'm going to draw my simplest fraction first, okay, because I want my fifths, my simplest part of the fraction, to be what goes down. 1, 2. That's close enough. Okay, they're not equal, but that's okay. So there's my fifths, and I'm going to shade in 2 of my fifths. Okay, and so I've got 2/5 shaded in. And then now I need to make this 2/5, because that's my simplest form of the fraction. I need to make my 2/5 into 4/10. So to make my 2/5 into 4/10, I would divide it like this. And then I would show the 2/5 grouped up together like that. And there are the rest of my fifths grouped up together. So that would be how I would draw that one. We'll practice the 6th, 9th one in class as well during our lesson. If you have any other questions after the lesson and after you've watched this video, there's one more YouTube video that you can watch, and then if you still need help, feel free to get back on with me. I will help you.